Hey, what's going on, everyone? I'm Jakejames Lugo, and welcome to the channel, where you'll find some of the most fair and honest game reviews out here. Now, things are going to be a little bit different than what you're normally used to seeing on the channel. This isn't a full review per se, but I did want to put together one video with my final definitive thoughts and perspective on Elden Ring, because I've been playing it so much and so many other people have been playing so much of it. Now, here's the thing. I've talked about this game a couple times, which I'll put some of the videos here so you guys could go check that out as well. But I've had my own thoughts and perspective on this game for a while, and now after having spent so many hours with it, a lot of it remains unchanged for one reason or another, which I'll get into. The thing about Elden Ring that I've said since day one was that this has to be one of the most overhyped games that I have ever seen. There's a lot of great praise that are going out there for this game. There's a lot of high scores and a lot of different reviews, and I feel like all of them, or at least for the most part, a good chunk of them, haven't really been all that fair, or at least been all that honest for, again, just how this game is, especially for a lot of people out there. Granted, they did sell 12 million copies, so clearly they're doing something right. But if we're going to be fair and honest on this channel, we have to look at this game within its totality, the complete and full experience, at least from some of the stuff that I had when I was playing through it. Before we get into any of the crazier stuff, I do have to say there is a couple aspects of this game that we should praise, and I'm definitely going to praise here. The biggest one being is the same one that everybody has brought up before, the size and the scope of the open world. This game is absolutely huge. There is so many places to go to, so many different things to discover and explore, so many things to kind of run into on accident. That type of stuff is one of the best aspects for an open world game. This kind of reminds me a little bit, I know people have brought up like Breath of the Wild and even Ghost of Tsushima in some points, but to me, this is in the same vein as like the original Legend of Zelda on the NES. That sense of just discoverability where you're able to explore everything around you. If you could see it, you could probably more than likely go over there and see what's there. That type of stuff is awesome and very key to having an awesome experience with an open world game. And Elden Ring has that pretty much in spades. The other aspect about this that goes hand in hand with it is that Elden Ring is actually a good looking game. Granted, the engine that From Software has been using has been, again, old at this point. They've been using it for quite a while. But this game I still think looks good. The character designs, the enemy designs, just the overall visual aesthetic of Elden Ring looks really freaking good to me. I've always said that From Software has great looking games. They've had games with just a certain aesthetic to them that I've wanted to see in a game like Castlevania. I think that's something would like go match made in heaven type of stuff. It looks really freaking cool in my opinion, and Elden Ring is no exception to that. Now, despite all of that I've mentioned that is great about the game, all of it I still feel like is overshadowed by all these other things that I have a big issue with, that I feel like are big negatives to the experience that you get from Elden Ring. It's stuff that I feel like so many different reviews and a lot of other people that are giving this game praise are completely overlooking or just flat out ignoring. And again, if we're going to be fair and honest here, we have to talk about that stuff. Even though I know a lot of the Soulsborne community that really rah-rahs for these types of games don't want to hear that. But again, if I'm going to be fair and honest, we got to talk about it. My biggest thing about Soulsborne games is that they're clearly not for everybody. And I understand that they're trying to appeal to a certain crowd, but there's just certain like basic things about this game and even about this genre that I've had a problem with for years, going all the way back to the original Dark Souls. Certain aspects about the UI, certain aspects about the way that the menus are designed, certain aspects about how the game just flat out just doesn't tell you about certain basic things that the players should know about, especially when they're first starting the game. I mean, it's crazy to me that everybody seems to be okay with that. The majority of people that play Elden Ring completely by accident skip the tutorial, which is in like some sort of pit in the first area that you go to when you first lose your life. And it's just crazy to me. Like, you just, like, how are we going to be like, oh, that's okay, where people are just skipping the tutorial, not by choice, but by accident? To me, that's a major problem. The other thing about this too, which I still feel like a lot of people are just off base with, there are so many bugs and glitches within Elden Ring's world that it's absolutely insane. A bunch of which I've ran into throughout all the hours I've played, but I've seen some really crazy ones that people have shared either on social media like TikTok or Twitter, or even in like streams with like Twitch and YouTube. I was watching different streams like Dr. Disrespect or Angry Joe and a bunch of other people play this game, and sometimes they'll run into things that I never ran into that look just as bad, whether it's during a boss fight, whether it's during the exploration of the world, whether it's all these different things. It's just absolutely insane how a game could get like almost a perfect score on a website and then have like all these things that are happening like straight up in everybody's faces. To me, that's unacceptable. I'm a real big stickler when it comes to technical aspects of games, especially with bugs and glitches or just things that look overall wrong or just look like they were poorly designed or poorly programmed. And we have a lot of that in Elden Ring. Just everybody just doesn't want to acknowledge it for some odd reason. One of the biggest things about that has to be the freaking camera. And it's like, oh my god, this camera, ever since like Demon Souls on PS3, has been such a big issue. And everybody complains about this, but everybody gives it a pass. And I'm like, why are we giving this a pass? This camera is a pain in the ass. This camera is like terrible in some cases. The lock-on, for whatever reason, right? This happened to me so many times, and I saw this happen to so many streamers that were playing this game live, right? Where they'll be in a boss fight, they'll be rolling around and stuff, and all of a sudden, your lock-on will just completely break. Like, for no reason. Like, they won't even get knocked down and your lock-on will just break. And then, on top of that, the camera will be all up in your face, all up in the back of your character, or all up in some other object, completely obscuring your view, and you'll get completely wiped out by either a boss or enemies that you're fighting. That type of stuff is annoying, it's frustrating, it's not good, in my opinion, and I really question, like, a lot of people that played this game that are just completely overlooking that. How are you going to tell me a game is a 10 out of 10 when you have stuff like that that happens on the regular? Like, seriously, it happens more often than you might realize. The other thing that pairs along with all that stuff is the fact that a lot of the hit detection for most enemies, especially bosses, seems to be very deceiving, seems to be very out of whack in my personal opinion. There are just some attacks where I'm engaged in like combat and stuff, and an attack will hit me in like a weird angle, and it will hit me in a way where I'm looking at this happen on screen, like I'm paying attention to everything going on, and like the meshes will never touch, but the hitbox is just so much more longer than what the actual attack looks like. And maybe it's just like a matter of perspective and just the way the camera is positioned in certain fights. But when that's happening to me a lot, especially for certain enemies that I've been dealing with over a period of hours, it just feels like something is out of whack or something needed to be adjusted there for a little bit more consistency. I think that's the right word to kind of bring into this conversation, is consistency. And I don't always see that as like something that's really good within my experience of Elden Ring. Again, depending on where you're going to within the world. Something I want to go back to that I mentioned earlier is that the game straight up doesn't tell you certain things that I feel like are very helpful to the player, and they seem very basic in nature. The biggest one, which I discovered recently because somebody told me on social media, was that you could actually interact with messages and you could get bonus like health boost from them. If you leave a message in an area and people start to praise it, like every time somebody praises it, you could get like a full like bar of health. I didn't know that because, as far as I know, there is nothing in the game that tells you that. And apparently that was a thing in Dark Souls 3, and I didn't even know that. Like, apparently that's been something that's been around for quite a while, but why does the game just not, like, hint at it? I know that From Software games are, like, super cryptic, and I know that, again, Dark Souls was like that, Bloodborne was like that, and even this one, too, to much more to an extent. But why doesn't the game actually give you like a hint of something like that? Why isn't there like certain things in like the notes that, which, by the way, are positioned all the way at the end of your freaking menu for some odd reason? Like, it's just a lot of weird decisions were made with this. But why doesn't the game have something on there that kind of alludes to that? Because I would have been doing that throughout most of my time. I would have been leaving little messages here and there in my own personal experience for other players in order to get that boost. Because it just makes sense. Like, why would you not want to do that? Again, if you don't use it, it's more than half the time in this game that you weren't told about it. And it's like, I don't understand why that's a thing. Why is it that that gets a pass? Because it feels like that's something that could be an aid to not just pro players and stuff, but really to a lot of newcomers that have never played a Souls game before. You know, you could give like this idea of like being punishing and being like really like, you know, intimidating as far as an experience. You could make a game tough like that. But to me, that's just a basic thing that you should just give to the player. It's just leave messages you might like actually like that you did so. You don't even need to tell them that you get a lot of health, but just kind of give them a hint to be like, yo, this is something you might want to interact with because it might help you out later on. But now we come to the thing that I feel like was the most impactful and most significant to my own personal experience. Maybe some of you out there may have felt a little bit similar to this depending on how you played this game. But the biggest thing about this that really kind of, not really ruined it, but affected my personal enjoyment for Elden Ring was the fact that I had to kind of do certain things to exploit or cheese the game in order to have it really open up for me and get to the point where I felt like I was exploring the world around me. What I mean by this is that there's a couple different spots within the game, depending on how far you get into it, where you could actually farm out different runes. You could kill certain enemies in a specific way to get a lot of runes in order to level up. Runes are the way that you level up throughout Elden Ring and how you spend to buy different things, right? So there's a certain area within the game after you complete a certain quest that gets you to this one point in this really difficult area, but you could actually exploit this one enemy that looks like this giant bird that you could shoot it with an arrow and it falls off a cliff, allowing you to get like, I think it's 11,000 runes. And you could keep doing that like every couple seconds to get so many in order to level up. That's how I was able to get to level 100 within a reasonable amount of time. Because without it, like, that just was not going to happen for a long time. And the thing about that is that I wanted to do this because I was really struggling throughout most of my time in the game, and it felt like it was mostly because I wasn't being given a lot of runes in order to level up. I wasn't getting access to a lot of different weapons. I've seen a lot of people like pick up and try to tackle some of these really tough bosses. These bosses are really hard for a lot of people. And if you're not really adequately prepared, or if you don't have a lot of the equipment to really kind of take these things on, you're going to get demolished every single time. You're going to be banging your head against the wall constantly. And to me, that's not really that fun. So you have to kind of go around, and the game encourages you to go to these other areas. But my problem is that in order for me to do that, I had to go do this one thing for like a long period of time in order to get my character to a point where I feel like I could stand a chance for the majority of things around me within that given area. The problem is, though, is that that's being done for a long time. I'm not exploring the worlds around me. I'm not going out and checking out other different areas in order to gain other like runes or equipment that might assist me as I'm going to tackle some of these bosses. The common argument with this is that you didn't need to do that. You could actually go and do all these other things. The game is not really kind of discouraging you from doing that. But that's my problem, though, is like the game isn't really doing anything. It's not really kind of telling you or nudging you in certain ways, or even doing so within like a good point of time while you're exploring. It just kind of just leaves you there, and it's just kind of like you have to either sink or swim, which might be fine for a lot of people. But if I feel like I have to go do this one exploit that clearly wasn't really made to be done like that in order to get a little bit further ahead, there seems to be a problem there. Again, I get the argument could be is like, oh, in other RPGs, you could farm out different experience, you could do other things that exploit some of the gameplay. But for the majority of those games, I would argue I didn't feel like I needed to do that. I didn't feel like I needed to have this one thing happen in order to get to this next area, which was next on my bucket list. It just is kind of stupid to me that that's an argument, because clearly that exploit wasn't made to be done like that. But when that becomes like a tool, like almost a mandatory thing in order to get around some of the crazy hurdles this game has, I feel like that's something that should be discussed as a problem with this game. And again, there's other things like that within the world of Elden Ring, but with the way that this game has been like overhyped and been received, a lot of people are just flat out ignoring that whole entire discussion. And I really think it comes down to a few different things, right? Souls-style games are not for everybody. The hardcore crowd that plays these games like this, that are really praising this game, that really contributed to like 12 million copies being bought for Elden Ring, I mean, I get it, like this game is geared towards them. However, if we're going to see like all these different outlets and different like creators and people talk about how this game is game of the year, this game is a 10 out of 10, this game is perfection for this style of combat, I think like, you know, they're being a little bit disingenuous here. They're not seeing everything from all sides. They're not seeing everything in its totality. And granted, I might not be the actual like demographic for Soul Styles game. Miyazaki and From Software made that very clear recently with some of their interviews that they did. But still, I am a lover of games. I do love playing all different types of genres, and I love exploring what the gaming like medium has to offer. And from what I'm seeing here, from actually trying to look at it from an objective point of view and a fair point of view and all that, there's a lot of stuff that I feel like is just being glanced over. And this game is just being put on this pedestal for a lot of different things that I feel like maybe it shouldn't be up there for. Now, the last thing I want to bring up for this video and kind of tie everything together in a nice bow is that there's always this discussion and rather debate between accessibility and difficulty and challenge whenever people are talking about Souls-style games. I feel like the majority of people really mix up the two because they actually mean one thing, but they actually mean the other, and they kind of vice versa, like just get these things crossed all the time. Accessibility, for people that don't know, doesn't necessarily mean making a game easier for newer players. Accessibility means having different types of settings and like different sliders and stuff in order for people that aren't able to play games normally, like how the majority of people do, and able to actually access that type of experience. Whether it's colorblind modes, whether it's actually making the text bigger, whether it's actually like making things actually able so that way people could actually engage with them. That's the problem with this, is that that's not the same as challenge or difficulty. Difficulty and challenge is the actual challenge and the problem that you engage with when you play a game. Whether it's a hard boss fight, whether it's like discovering a different puzzle or a solution to that puzzle, or finding different areas, like, you know, different things you have to gather together towards one big quest. That's difficulty and challenge. Again, two very different things. When people say that they want games to be more accessible, what they're really trying to say all the time is that they want games to be easier, not really understanding what accessibility means. This is why you got guys like Steven Spoon that actually talk about accessibility all the time, because they're talking about the stuff that I mentioned before. They're not talking about difficulty or challenge. Putting on a colorblind mode or actually messing around with the text size, messing around with the way that certain colors are put on display on the TV is not the same as changing the overall challenge of a game. What people really want, or at least what they're complaining about, is that they want the games to be easier, where the bosses don't feel like they're so cheap, where the actual fights that you engage with aren't that difficult. Again, two very different things. But does that necessarily need to be done with something like Elden Ring? I think the majority of the time, a lot of this stuff when it comes to challenge and difficulty could really be changed up if they actually tinker around and make things better within certain aspects of, again, the technical parts of the game, with the way that the menus are done, and certain other aspects that are more quality of life changes, as opposed to really changing up the difficulty of the fights themselves. This is something that I feel like nobody has been talking about with Elden Ring, or at least they've been glancing over or completely ignoring. And this is something that I think is very important that more people need to talk about, and at least define the two different parts of this, rather than getting them crossed up all the time. Because when you're talking about accessibility, you're not really talking about difficulty, you're not talking about challenge. When you're talking about challenge or difficulty, you're not really talking about accessibility. So if you know the difference between the two, or at least have a better understanding of why they're so different, I feel like everybody, whether you're a big Soulsborne fan or a newcomer to this stuff, will have a much better discussion and probably less of a debate about this game. So overall, those are my full thoughts about Elden Ring, and I know it's a lot to take in because there's so much more you could discuss about with this game and the genre it comes from. But the big question is, can I recommend that you play Elden Ring on any platform? The honest truth is no, and not because I feel like the game is terrible. All my criticisms that I mentioned up to this point in the video, especially if you stuck with me this long, thank you by the way. My big thing is that all my criticisms aren't saying that the game is trash. I don't think that the game is garbage or anything like that. A lot of people seem to be on this very binary thing, like you either love the game or absolutely hate the game, with no in between. And I don't think that's fair to anybody involved. The big thing is that this genre and this style of game is not for everybody. While there's some good aspects about it, again, the open world is awesome as far as the size and the sheer scope of stuff that you could explore and interact with. But with all these other big issues that I've mentioned beforehand, with the way that it's designed is very obtuse for a lot of people and very unwelcoming for a certain style of gamer, I feel like this game is not something for everybody. If you've never played a Soul-style game, you should not play Elden Ring because you are not going to enjoy it. This might be the most open and the most welcoming of the genre, but there's still a really big barrier of entry and a real big gate that a lot of people are going to just hit their heads against the wall with, and it's something that I feel like the majority of people are not going to find fun. On the flip side of that, if you've been playing Soul-style games, this is right up your alley, because it takes all the best aspects of those games that you've engaged with and puts it in an open world setting and really blows up the size and scope of this type of stuff, and you're really going to have a lot of fun dealing with that type of challenge, dealing with just the exploration aspect of it, really engaging with a lot of the things that you could discover in Elden Ring. That type of experience is going to be a lot of fun for you. But here's the thing though, with all that stuff being said, do I agree with a lot of the sentiments that different reviewers and critics have been saying about this game? Is it really the best game of 2022? Is it a Game of the Year contender already? That might be the case for some people, but personally for me, I don't think it's Game of the Year. I think that it's something to be talked about, but not the best game this year. I feel like there's going to be a lot of other games released throughout 2022 that are going to get overshadowed by Elden Ring, and I think it has to do mostly because a lot of people are afraid to criticize this game. A lot of people are afraid to bring up certain aspects because of how rabid the community could be for Soulsborne games. But that's the thing though. We're fair and honest on this channel. We see things in their complete totality. And to be honest with you, for all the good that this game has, there's a lot of other things that don't really change my mind and don't really clinch it for me for being one of the best games of 2022. But of course, that's just my own opinion about Elden Ring. That's just my own perspective. Let me know what you guys think about this game. I'm pretty sure many of you are going to down below in the comments section. Tell me, do you agree or disagree? Do you like some of the different aspects about Elden Ring? Or what are some of your favorite parts about it within your own experience? Because especially if you've been playing this, you've been playing it for a very long time. You can't really play Elden Ring for a couple hours and then expect to get the full scope of what this game is. Because there's a lot of good and a lot of bad. But keep the discussion going. Make sure that you guys keep it civil. But feel free to put your thoughts about this stuff down below in the comments section. Hey, thank you everyone for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it enough to check out some of my other videos I'll list here on the side in just a moment. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel to see new content that I post up as it goes out. You can also join my Patreon for early access to new videos and exclusive content you'll only see over there. Don't forget to join my Discord server via the link in the description too. There's a lot of great people who love gaming and make an amazing community in there that I know you'll love being part of. Hope to see you again real soon. Peace out and stay epic, everyone.